Hey there, and welcome to this rapidMATION Intelligent Accounts Payable demo. Just to get started, let's have a look at an overview of the solution. There's multiple different building blocks of the solution, but essentially it consists of the ability to automatically extract data from an invoice, then route that for some sort of business approval within inside their business where someone can do some coding or add some tracking categories to the invoice. Then it can move through to the finance stage where a finance person may be able to review that. And eventually what we'll do is we'll automatically capture that invoice into the relevant finance system. Alternatively, if you didn't want to write that data direct into the finance system, we provide the ability to export any of that data. Now, the brilliant part about the rapidMATION Intelligent Accounts Payable solution is that it's your intelligent accounts process your way. And what this means is you can use it out of the box or you can customize it for your exact needs. And what we do is we give you 20 days of customization support and 16 hours of application support that's built into the price. And what this means is we license you for some market-leading automation technology which can be used to automate many other processes across your business. So in the example we're going to see today, we're going to show you three different types of technologies that come together to make up this solution. And that's the automation platform from Nintex K2. It's the leading market intelligent document processing platform from Abby. And it uses a platform called Synatic, which allows us to read and write data between multiple different APIs. If we go across and have a look at what we're going to see today, let's go through a quick run through. So what's going to happen is an email comes into an email inbox. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick up that email from the email inbox and we're going to move that to a separate folder called in progress. And what's going to happen is that we're going to send back an automatic email response to the user to let them know that we've picked up that specific invoice and we provide them with a reference number. Once we've done that, we're going to take that PDF and we're going to send it across to Abby. And Abby's going to classify and make sure that that document is in fact an invoice. And if it is an invoice, and if perhaps Abby can't extract all the data from the invoice, what we're going to do is we're going to send it off to a human user for manual review. And they're going to have the ability to see the invoice on one side of the pane and then mark up that invoice in any way to extract all the data that's needed. Now, of course, that's the exception rather than the rule. And what we're hoping to do is that Abby will manually or automatically extract all of the data from that invoice. The best part, though, is that if it does go for manual review, what this means is that Abby gets more and more intelligent each time it sees more and more invoices. So it has the ability to learn from that human in the loop interaction. So whether it automatically manages to extract the data or perhaps if we need to send it for manual review, the next step will be that we go through and we export all of that data from Abby. And this is where we kick off the approval process. So the approval process is 100% customizable. But the first step that we do is we route a task to someone in the business that can review the details of the invoice and do any coding on that specific invoice. They can also make one of two decisions. They can decide to decline the invoice, which means that the vendor gets notified that the invoice has been declined and they can see any comments of why it may have been declined, or alternatively, they can approve the invoice. If they approve the invoice, that moves it on to the review step. So someone inside the business can then go through and review this invoice. This could be someone in the finance team. They could make sure that the coding is all 100% correct, and they can play bat and ball with this invoice. And what I mean by that is they can push that back to the approver with some comments should they need some additional information, or alternatively, they can then approve that specific invoice. The next step of the process is what happens is this moves on to automatically capturing the invoice into the finance system or the ability to export any of that invoice data. Now we use some nice APIs where we can write data into a vast variety of different systems. And those systems can range from things like Xero or SAP or Salesforce or JobPack or Baseplan or a number of other systems where there might be API access that allow us to write this data into the system. Finally, what we do is once we've captured that invoice into the finance system, we move that email into a completed folder. If anything goes wrong during the capturing of that invoice into the finance system, what we'll move that to is we'll assign a task to a user to manually process that invoice, and we'll send an email out to them to let them know that it needs to be manually processed. And finally, what we'll do is we'll automatically send out an email to the vendor to let them know that that invoice has been processed, and we'll mark that invoice as complete. Alright, as part of the solution, when we're going through and we're actually coding up the different invoice, we've provided two different kind of pieces of functionality that will allow us to do that. And we can go through and we can actually add a tracking category or an account name into that specific invoice and allow the user to mark up and code the invoice with each of those. Of course, that coding can directly come from whatever the finance system may be, and we can obviously include that automatically into the screens for the users to use. Perfect, so let's go have a look at what this looks like in action. First up, I'm just going to use this invoice as an example. So in this example, it's from a company called Will Trading Stace. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to submit this into an email inbox that we will pick up for processing. Now, first up, let's just go have a look at kind of some of the solution building blocks. So this is the landing page of the Intelligent Accounts Payable solution. There's a vast variety of different reports that we can surface inside here. But the first thing that I'd like to take you through is I'd like to take you through this mapping for invoice approval. Now, for the ABI manual reviewer steps, or for the default reviewer, or even for finance manual processing, we can obviously go through and we can configure one or more users as part of our organization who would perform those roles for us. And if we haven't set up any specific mappings for specific vendors, then what we would do is it would fall back to some of these default individuals. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and get a little bit more specific. And I'm going to say for my Will Trading Stace vendor, and in this case, the business unit was part of Kennard's Hire. What I'm going to do is I'm specifically going to go tell it that for this vendor and for that specific business unit, these tasks should get sent to a specific individual. And in this case, I'm just going to use my user, which is Sean Lysigang. Now I can go through and configure this to a very low level of detail to make sure that we can go through and we can go send any invoices for approval or review to anyone inside the organization. Again, if that mapping isn't created, it will just fall back to the default approver. Next up, what I'm going to do is I'll just show you something that we call mapping for vendor coding. And what this is generally when we receive invoices from vendors, and generally those vendors perform similar services for us. So what this is the ability to say, instead of someone needs to go through and code up these invoices every time they see it from a specific supplier, we're going to make some intelligent defaults. And in this case, if you have a look at this one here for Will Trading Stace, it's going to pick the account name as inventory, and it's going to use facility management as the tracking category. But of course, if I wanted to go through and edit that and update that in any way, I could come back through here and set any defaults that I may like for any of these different categories. I'm just going to leave it as is for the moment. So what we should expect to see is that when this comes for approval, these codes will automatically be mapped for me. Alright, so let's go have a look at what this looks like in action. So here I have the demo at rapidMATION.com email inbox, and we can see here I'm in the invoice folder. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to send across an email to demo@rapidMATION.com with this specific invoice that I showed you in it. So I'm going to go through and fire that across and send that across to that email inbox. What we'll see is that email has now arrived inside the email inbox, and what there is an automation running in the background that will very shortly pick up this specific email. And there we have it. We can see that that invoice was marked as read, and what's happened is it's moved across to the in progress folder, and now our automation is busy going through and processing this specific invoice. What we can see straight away is that an email has been fired off to the person that sent in this specific invoice to let them know that the email and invoice has been received and they've been provided with a specific reference number. Now what they can do is there might have been one or more invoices attached with this specific email, so they can now use this reference number to interface with the company and check up any details with those invoices that they then submitted. So what's happening in the background now is that the email's been received, we've moved it to in progress, we've sent back that response, and now what's happening in the background is this is getting sent across to ABI so that ABI can then classify and extract the details from this specific invoice. Now, as I mentioned previously, if ABI didn't manage to extract all the details or any of the rules failed around that specific invoice, what will happen is that will get sent for ABI manual review, where a human user can go and actually look at that specific invoice. Now in this example, I've set all these invoices to go for review just so that I can show you what the steps look like. So let's go have a look at what that looks like. Well, the first thing that happens in the background is as soon as someone gets assigned a task, they get sent an email to let them know that they have a task that they need to complete. And should they need to go and actually open up that task, they can open them up straight by clicking on this click to open worklist item link in the email. Now, in addition to that, what they can do is they can come back in here and they can come back up to their task list. And inside their task list, if I just refresh this, we can see that this new task has actually popped up on this specific screen. And now what happens is that this user can then go through and they have the ability to review all of the invoice details, and they can see all of the things that Abby has managed to extract from it on the right-hand side. Now, just to show you what this looks like, all of these rules are completely customizable. And what I've done here is I haven't included any of these purchase orders in the catalog. So what we're saying here is we can see that some of these purchase order and the purchase order items are not found, and that's why it's surfacing up a specific warning to me. In addition to that, as I click through these different tasks here, you'll notice that in the screen over here, you'll notice where all of this data is currently coming from. And Abby, without any training, has automatically managed to pick up all of these details from the specific invoice. So it's picked up obviously the vendor, the business unit, and all of those details for me. In addition to that, it's running a number of different pieces of rules for me. So here it's actually working out the tax rate, and what it's saying is that it wants me to make sure that the tax rate is correct. As soon as I clear that rule, you'll notice that the warning then moves away from this window, and I can continually go on and finish off the markup of this invoice. Now again, if perhaps there was a piece of data that was missing from this invoice, and if I just scroll up here a bit, perhaps it didn't automatically pick up the date, what a user can do is they can simply zoom into this, they can select the field, and they just simply draw a line through it, and you can see that Abby then goes through and picks up all of that data. Now what happens in the background is every single time that I actually teach Abby where some of these fields are, it gets better and better every single time. So over time, it will get to know all of these invoices. So out of the box, it works really nicely, but should there be some fields from certain invoices that might be a little bit more crazy or harder to get, Abby will get cleverer and cleverer every time we go through and we show it where this data is. Now in this case, it's going through and it's asking me about some of the purchase orders. So if I wanted to, and if I had some purchase order lookup, I could come in here and I could click on this table. It's identified some fields which it believes it might be a purchase order number. But again, in the background, I didn't populate any of these purchase order tables just because I wanted this to come to verification. I could go through and I could obviously manually patch that up and do what I like, but in this case I'm going to say that that's all good from my perspective, and I'm going to come here and I'm just going to go through and I'm going to complete this specific invoice. So what that means now is that task has been completed, and myself as the Abby manual reviewer has no more work to do on this specific invoice. Alright, so now that the manual review step is finished, what Abby's going to go do, it's going to go process all of that invoice information, and it's going to provide all of the extracted details of that invoice for us. So the next part of the process then is it kicks off the approval flow. And generally the approval flow, a task gets assigned to someone in the business who can then go through and actually review that invoice, all of the extracted details, and perform any coding on that specific invoice. So if I flip over to my email inbox, we'll very shortly see that a new email will arrive to let me know that I have a new task. And exactly in the same way, I can go through and I can go and click on the open worklist item that takes me directly to that task. Or alternatively, if I've reviewed that task and I want to respond via email, I simply click reply on this email and I go back with the approve or decline task, and that will automatically approve or decline this specific invoice for me. Now what we've done as well is we've configured something called an escalation, and here comes through the escalation. So an escalation, it allows me to give someone a gentle nudge if they haven't completed a task in a certain time period. So for the sake of the demo, we've just set that as a 1 minute interval, and as soon as someone hasn't completed that task that's been assigned to them within 1 minute, they get an escalation email that looks similar like this to give them a gentle nudge to let them know that they need to complete the task. Now an escalation could take many different different shapes and forms. In this example, it's an email prod or nudge, but we could also pick up tasks from this individual and pass it on to someone else in the team to make sure that this task is completed in a timely manner. All right, let's go back across into our dashboard here and let's come back into our task list. And if we just give that a quick refresh, we'll notice that this new approval task has popped up for me. And if I open up this task, what it's going to do, it's going to load up all of the details of the invoice on the right-hand side. So the first thing I get to see here is at the top of the screen, I can make a decision and I can either approve or decline and add some comments about this task. And then what I can do is I can see all of the extracted invoice details on the left-hand side. I can see the actual invoice on the right-hand side. And if I page down to the bottom, I can see here that it's extracted all of the different line items for me. One good thing to note, it's already automatically put in that coding account and coding tracking category for the specific vendor for me. So in this instance, it's automatically done the work for me. But of course, what I can do is I can come through here and I can decide to change this in any way. So perhaps if I didn't believe that it should go to the inventory and perhaps it should go to the cost of sales field, what I can do is I can update that. And depending on my settings in the solution, this could update any of the intelligent defaults as we go through the process. I also have the ability to apply these to all line items or individual line items, so you can do it in whichever way you like. So in this case, I'm going to come up here, I'm just going to select the approve, and I'm going to leave some comments for the reviewer. And I'm just going to say updated the coding or the account category rather to cost of sales. Looks all good. All right, and once I click submit on this, what that's going to do is that's going to then go complete this task, and I have no more work to do on this specific task. In exactly the same way, I'm performing the reviewer role in this process too. So in exactly the same way, I get a similar email notification that lets me review the high-level details of the task. I can click on the link to go and action the task, or alternatively, I can reply back to the email. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into our dashboard, come back into my task list, and we'll see that there's the review invoice task on my task list. Now, the first thing that I can actually go through and see is I can come down here and I can review the exact same information, but I can review the full kind of comment history of everything that might have happened with this specific invoice. In addition to that, what's actually happened is we have something that allows us to track the invoice through any stage of the process. So here we can see this was the latest email that I sent in, and I can see here that the email is currently in the in progress folder. And if I click on this specific reference number, I can then go see exactly what's happened with this invoice as it's moved through the approval process. So it's come into received, went to in progress, it went to Abby, did some manual review, it's been processed by Abby, the approval has started and then completed, and we're currently now in the review step, which is currently where we are in the workflow process. So it's a really nice way to be able to see exactly where we are in the process. All right, so let's go back up to the tasks here and let's come back into this review step. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, I'd like to approve this, and I'm going to say looks good to me. Now, just before I go through and I approve this specific task, let's go have a look at what's going to happen next. So once we go to the reviewer step, what this is automatically going to go do is it's going to go capture this invoice into the finance system for me. And we would have the ability to obviously export any of the data or automatically publish that data into the finance system. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I've hooked up our solution into a system called Xero. And Xero is a very common tool that people use to manage and help with all their accounting needs. Now inside this area, I've come into business and I've come into bills to pay. And what you'll see here is we're currently in the draft bills. And what we've configured this to do is add this invoice in automatically as a draft into the draft bills status. So what I'll do here is let me go through and let me go and approve this task. If I click on submit, we'll notice that all of the work has been done on that specific task. And what that will do, it will drop that item off my work list. Now, if I came back in here and I came back into my little diagram where I can see exactly what's happening, we'll see now that this little diagram has lit up a little bit differently for me now. And what we can see here is that it started in the finance system and it's actually completed in the finance system. And then what it's going to go do is it'll go move this email to the completed folder for me, and it will actually mark this invoice as complete. So just before we go and look at that, let's go have a quick look at what this looks like inside the finance system. So if I give the screen a refresh, we'll now see that the Will Trading Stace email, or invoice rather, has been added automatically into Xero. If I open this up, we can go through and we can see all of the details have automatically been captured for me for this specific invoice, and now someone in the finance team can carry on and go through and process it. If I come back into my reports, I'll notice I can go through and I can see the full screen flow of exactly what's happened. We can see that the email has moved to completed, and what we can see is the invoice has been completed. And we can see all of the comments that form part of this invoice approval process. So if we just go across into our email inbox, we can see that it's moved from the in progress folder and it's automatically been moved across to the completed folder for me. All right, so that's just a quick example and demo of the rapidMATION Intelligent Accounts Payable process. Again, you can use it out of the box, or you have some customization time to customize it to your specific needs. It is a really, really great solution to run your intelligent accounts payable process your way. Speak soon.